Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. I hope everyone had an enjoyable week and has an even better weekend. Sit back, relax, enjoy, and stay sinful. Story number 1. Before I start, I feel I should say that my mom has always been a generous person, always letting people stay at our home rent-free till they got back on their feet. At the time of this story, there were 2 of my mom's close friends staying with us. Both were women and one had 3 young daughters with her. Adding the guests, my parents, my younger brother and myself, there were 9 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment. I was 7 years old when this happened. I remember all of us kids being very sick from the flu, so we were all knocked into a deep slumber on the living room floor and sofas. It was 2:30 a.m., and my mom, along with her 2 friends, were just arriving home from their night shift. One of my mom's friends, Elena, had gone directly into our garage, which was where she was temporarily sleeping. The garage had no direct connection to our apartment and could only be accessed from the yard. Not 5 minutes after they had arrived home, there was a knock on the door. My mom and her other friend Sylvia quickly became silent. Who could be knocking at 2:30 a.m.? At first they thought it was the taxi driver, who they were good friends with, coming to return something they had left in the car. So my mom went to open a small 6-inch by 6-inch peep window the door had. Through the metal screen she could see the shadow of a man that definitely wasn't the taxi driver. "Who is it?" she asked. "Open the door," said the man. Taken aback by the man's request, my mom told her friend to go wake my father. She then turned back to the man and asked again who he was and what he wanted. The man simply told her in a calm voice to open the door again. "I'm here to cure the children," he said. My mom began to freak out. How did he know we were all sick? My mom turned around to look at us sleeping in the living room. Startled, she turned back around as the man spoke again. My mom had had enough. "Open the door. I have the medicine the children need to get better." My mom had had enough. She screamed at the man to fuck off and leave, closing the peep window and making sure the doors were locked. Sylvia was now back in the living room telling my mom that my dad wouldn't wake up. He was an alcoholic, you see, so he was drunk asleep and would be good for nothing in that certain situation. Just then a knock came from the window situated over one of the sofas. Both Sylvia and my mom froze, turning to where the sound came from. "Open the door. The children need their medicine," came the man's voice, now sounding more impatient than ever. "Go away or I'm calling the police," my mom yelled. Too afraid to pull the curtains back and give the man a clear view of me and the rest of the kids. "You can't stop me from giving them their medicine. He sent me here," the man explained. "Who sent you here?" my mom demanded. "Our Lord. Now open the door. The children will die if they don't take this medicine," the man taunted. My mom then told her friend to call the taxi driver and ask if he could come back, since he couldn't have been too far away. My mom then screamed through the window, "We're calling the police." "Go ahead," said the man. "Our Lord will have his way." "Why are you here? Who sent you?" my mom demanded, trying to sound brave and pissed, when in reality she was terrified. "Our Lord sent me. The devil," the man softly explained. "Now let me in. The children are sick and I have something to make them better." My mom lost her shit right then and there, and just as her friend had hung up with the taxi driver, she screamed at her to call the police. That's when she heard the man outside let out a taunting laugh. Not a minute later, she heard soft steps walking away. Gathering up her courage, she pulled the curtain aside just an inch and peeked out. In the dim moonlight, you could see the silhouette of the man, walking away down the street. When he reached the sidewalk, he just stayed there, taking a few steps now and then under the street lamp. It was almost as if he was casually waiting for someone or something. My mom and her father watched the man from the window for almost 10 minutes until he finally walked away. Just 1 minute later, they saw their friend pull up in his taxi. Feeling a relief wash over them, my mom quickly opened the doors and rushed towards the garage, knocking rapidly and calling for Elena. When she finally opened up, my mom dragged her back into the apartment and locked all the doors. The taxi driver drove around the surrounding blocks a few times, but never saw a single person out in the street. The police never came, seeing as they never made the call and decided on not doing so, since filing a report and explaining to the landlord why there were 9 people living at their apartment instead of only 4 would be difficult. The next day, we all celebrated Thanksgiving together, the adults talking about the events that had taken place the night before, and us kids playing board games and watching TV, completely oblivious to the danger we had come so close to. It's safe to say we stayed locked up behind closed doors that night. Story number 2. As a bit of backstory, I'm from a very rural area and have recently moved to the city for university. I'd started to feel a bit homesick and missing the countryside, so I decided to go on a walk in the woods close to my accommodation. It was still light when I started my walk around 2 p.m. With it being winter, it's been getting pitch black at 4:30 p.m. After about an hour and a half of walking, I noticed that it was starting to get pretty dark, so I turned back because I didn't want to be in the forest in total darkness. On my way back, I saw a guy maybe in his early 20s. He was obviously drunk with a plastic bag full of bottles of alcohol. As I was on a path with steep slopes on either side, I was pretty much forced to walk past him, doing so with keeping as much distance as possible between myself and him and keeping my eyes focused straight ahead. As soon as I passed him, his muttering became very loud. I was sure he was trying to talk to me, but it was still unintelligible, so I ignored him. Then I heard him yelling and turned around to see him walking towards me. There was about 10 meters between us. I still couldn't make out what he was saying, but he was walking quickly towards me and eyeing me up and down with a really creepy look on his face. I didn't want any trouble, especially considering I'd only seen one other person quite a while beforehand. I simply said, "Nah, leave me alone." He clearly heard as I saw him register my sentence through his drunken brain, yet he simply shook his head and carried on walking towards me. At this point, I panicked. I pulled out my phone and shouted, "I'll call the police." I knew this was an empty threat considering the fact that I didn't even know the name of the forest, and knew that it would be a long time before the police would get to me. Not to mention my phone was at 10%. I guess in this case I was lucky he was drunk as he froze, put his hands up and mumbled, "All right," before beginning to walk the other way. I walked quickly away, looking several times over my shoulder to check if he was still following me. It's probably a good thing I did, seeing as each time I looked back he was facing me, maybe to check to see if I wouldn't notice before he could get to me. Like I said, this could have been nothing, and have simply been a harmless drunk guy that I blew out of proportion. Either way, next time I go for a walk, I'm fully charging my phone, taking a kitchen knife. Story number 3. I was walking home at about 3 a.m. from a night out with my friends. There are 4 of us. We got into a taxi and just dropped off my last friend, who I will change her name for personal reasons. We had just dropped off Lola, and as I didn't live too far down from her, I decided to get some fresh air before getting back. Lola asked if I'd be all right and to call her when I was home. I agreed and I started to walk, letting her go inside to get warm. Just as you do, I started walking home. I was walking quite slow, and I was halfway home when I got this sudden eerie feeling I was being followed. I decided to slowly turn, taking in my surroundings to check, and I was. Behind me was what seemed to be a man in all black. I instantly panicked, as I'm a very paranoid person and don't normally see people about at 4 a.m. unless they're doing something dodgy that I don't want to be involved in. I had thought out a whole tactic in my head, thinking about what I was going to do, either pepper spray him and punch him if he approached me. But all that changed once I decided I'd pretend to cross the road and take a better look. As I prepare to cross the road, I see there is a large object in his hand. It shines as the overhanging street lamp lights it up, and I instantly forget about my tactic and think of the worst being the panicker and overthinker I am. The man stopped when I stopped, but I decided to run as fast as I could into some bushes near the field, down the road passing my home, because I still needed to get my keys out of my bag and unlock the door. And I thought by that time I'd be a goner. I looked through the bushes where I could see the man, and he couldn't see me. He was still running towards where he had seen me last. Then he stopped right in front of me, and indeed holding a knife like I thought. I nearly cried, but I knew he was too close, he would hear me. He then carried on down the street, looking both ways, still trying to find me. After what felt like hours, but was only 5 minutes of waiting, I got my keys out of my bag, stood up and didn't even look back once. I got to my door and quickly unlocked it with shaking hands. I got in and slammed the door, waking everyone, but I didn't care. I burst into tears in my family's arms. They called the police as soon as they could understand what my quivering lips had to tell them. The police searched and found no one. I'm absolutely gutted they never found this man, who was out to harm people. There was a report a day after that some woman had been attacked and stabbed not far from where I was hiding in the fields, and the report said it was a man in all black. I still fear going out. Creepy man with bad intentions. I hope we never meet again. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. The Christmas season is right around the corner, and I sure would love to feature true horror stories of the Christmas kind all throughout the month of December. Please take the time to put some stories together for yours truly. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. Till we meet again, stay sinful.